The wind carried dust across the open military base, swirling around tents and rows of polished boots. It was Family Honor Day, one of those rare events where civilians were allowed on base to glimpse a world most never understood. Cadets in pressed uniforms stood tall, rifles gleaming under the sun, their instructors barking orders sharp enough to slice through steel. From the far end of the lot, a battered pickup truck rolled to a stop. Its paint had long surrendered to rust, and the bumper sagged like a tired jaw. A woman stepped out first, leathery hands, sun-creased eyes, and silence stitched into every movement. Her boots were worn but clean, her denim jacket patched with care. She opened the passenger door, and a little girl hopped down, landing softly on the gravel. She couldn't have been older than 10. Slender, freckled, her long braid dusted with straw. She wore her father's old military shirt tucked into faded jeans, sleeves rolled, boots scuffed. Strapped to her belt was a pink plastic pistol. Bright, harmless, laughable. Cadets noticed her almost immediately. One nudged another and grinned. Hey, cowboy girl brought a toy to a gun show. Snickers followed. The girl didn't flinch. She just stared at them, eyes the color of cold ash, quiet and unreadable. Behind her, a Palomino horse stood tied to the truck bed, tall and calm. His coat was brushed smooth, but age showed in his knees and the gray in his mane. The girl stroked his muzzle once before walking forward. Let her be, the mother murmured, mostly to herself. But the laughter grew louder, and then came the voice that cut through the clamor. Well, I'll be damned. What's this little sharpshooter gonna do? Clean our rifles with glitter? The sergeant stepped from the shade of a canopy, his voice rough like gravel, humor folded into every crease of his lined face. Decorated chest, crooked grin. A man used to being listened to. "It's your kid, ma'am," he called. The woman didn't answer. The girl stepped forward. "I'm Marley J.," she said, plain and strong. A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. Something in her voice didn't match the toy gun on her hip. The sergeant chuckled, squinting at her. "And what are you here for, Miss J? Trying to get a merit badge in unicorn wrangling?" More laughs. Marley glanced at the weapon table beside him. Rows of M4 rifles lay disassembled for a speed trial. Cadets were competing for the fastest reassembly time. Winner got bragging rights and a commemorative knife. One boy had just finished in 21 seconds. Marley took a single step toward it. "I could beat that," she said. That silenced them. The sergeant raised a brow. "Beat what, kid?" She nodded toward the M4. "That. I can do it faster." The boy who held the top score leaned in, sneering. "Please. It ain't a toy gun, sweetheart. It's an M4. Real steel." The sergeant folded his arms. "And how fast do you think you could put one together?" Marley didn't blink. 8 seconds. They erupted, some in laughter, some in disbelief. One girl spit her water out, nearly choking. 8 seconds? The sergeant repeated. "You ever even held a real rifle?" She said nothing, just waited. The sergeant exchanged looks with his assistant, then finally shrugged. "All right then, Miss J. You want to embarrass yourself, we'll oblige." He motioned to a cadet. A fresh M4 was laid out on the table. Bolt carrier, barrel, lower receiver, magazine, all stripped and gleaming. Marley stepped forward, small hands flexing. No gloves. No hesitation. The sun caught the pink of her toy pistol as it bumped against her hip. The crowd leaned in, murmurs rippling. The sergeant pulled out a stopwatch. "Ready?" She nodded once. "Go." Everything went quiet. It wasn't just the crowd falling silent. It was the way Marley moved. The air seemed to thicken around her. Fingers danced with purpose. She slid the bolt carrier group in, locked the charging handle, slapped the upper and lower receivers together with a sharp clack. Magazine in. Safety on. Hands lifted. "Done," she said. The stopwatch beeped. The sergeant stared at the screen. 7.8 seconds. No one said a word. Marley stood calm, her chest rising with steady breath. Not prideful, not smug. "Just done." The sergeant cleared his throat. "You been practicing?" "My dad taught me," she said. Something shifted in the sergeant's face. "Your dad got a name?" "Staff Sergeant Drew J. Killed in action. 3 years ago." Her voice didn't crack. Her hands didn't shake. The sergeant let the words settle. He knew that name. Everyone in that circle did. Drew J. had been a legend, one of those soldiers whose stories outlived the missions. The cadets slowly backed off, eyes lowered. The sergeant looked at the girl again, this time without humor. He nodded, once, then turned to the cadets. "Any of you laughing now?" No one replied. Marley turned and walked back to her horse. The crowd parted. Tank whinnied low as she stroked his neck. Her mother still stood by the truck, eyes wet but proud. "You didn't have to do that," the woman whispered. Marley looked up at her. "I know." Behind them, the sergeant was still staring. At the rifle, the stopwatch, the girl. He muttered under his breath, half to himself, half to the ghost of someone he once knew. "She's not a little girl," he said. "She's Drew's kid." And somewhere deep in his chest, something stirred that hadn't in a long, long time. He stepped forward. "Miss J," he called. "You free for a walk?" She looked back, uncertain. "I think we need to talk," he said, "about what your father left behind." And Marley, the girl with the toy gun and war in her blood, turned to follow. The walk was quiet at first. Gravel crunched beneath Marley's boots as she followed the sergeant through rows of tents and concrete buildings sunbaked into a colorless haze. She glanced once at her mother, who nodded. Just a small motion, but permission all the same. The sergeant didn't speak until they reached a shaded bench near the armory. He sat, motioning for Marley to do the same. She stayed standing, fingers hooked in her belt, gaze steady. "I served with your father," he said finally. "Back before you were born. He was a silent type, too. Drove people crazy how little he spoke. But when he did, he exhaled through his nose. It meant something." Marley shifted her weight, waiting. "You did that in under 8 seconds. That wasn't luck." She shrugged. "He taught me on old parts in the barn. We didn't have much. Just training manuals and a crate of junk he'd smuggled back home." The sergeant grunted. He always said war wasn't just about bullets. It was about rhythm, knowing when to breathe and when to move. He looked down at his weathered hands. "You've got his rhythm." Marley didn't respond. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of gun oil and heat off the blacktop. "I ain't in the business of giving praise for show," he said. "But what you did back there, that wasn't normal." Marley tilted her head. "Then why were they laughing?" "Because they didn't expect you to be real." He stood again, back popping as he straightened. "You want to prove you're more than just a trick shot? Come with me." She hesitated only a moment before following. They walked into a side entrance of the training facility, past a group of cadets who whispered behind their hands as she passed. Inside, the hall smelled of sweat, brass, and worn-out ambition. The sergeant led her into a storage room lit by a single buzzing fluorescent bulb. Metal lockers lined the wall. Dust floated in thick beams of light. He pulled down a green duffel from the highest shelf and set it on the table. "I found this last week, clearing out old gear. Had his name on it." Marley moved closer as he unzipped it. Inside were pieces of a weapon older than her, an M14, partially disassembled, marked by time and oil. Alongside it, a small notebook, dog tags, and a worn photo. She reached for the picture. It was her father, smiling rare and small, standing beside the sergeant. In the background, a younger version of Tank, the horse, barely a colt. "He carried that rifle till the end," the sergeant said. "Refused to switch over to the newer models. Said the weight kept him honest." Marley ran a thumb along the edge of the photo, then set it down gently. "He said the old ones taught you patience." The sergeant nodded. "You ever ride and shoot?" "Not for speed," she said. "For silence." He studied her. "We're holding an exhibition in 2 days. Mixed course, marksmanship and maneuvering. Horseback optional. No prize, just respect. You win that in front of the brass. No one's going to call your gun a toy again." She didn't answer right away. He leaned against the table. "I'm not offering this to make a show out of you. I'm offering because I've seen what happens when people ignore talent just because it don't look the way they expect." Marley looked up. "What if I don't win?" He smiled faintly. "Then at least they'll stop laughing." That night, she didn't sleep. Back at the tiny rented trailer on the edge of the base lot, she sat outside with Tank, sharpening her saddle straps by lantern light. Her mother stayed inside, quiet as always, trusting her daughter to chase whatever ghosts were hers to carry. Tank flicked his ears as Marley rested her head against his side. "They don't see you, do they?" she whispered. "Just see what they think you are. Old. Slow." The horse nudged her shoulder in reply. She rose before the sun the next day. By the time the base stirred to life, Marley was already riding the outskirts of the perimeter, pushing Tank hard through the dry scrub and loose gravel, dodging imaginary targets, whispering her father's mantras into the wind. Breathe before the turn. Don't blink before the shot. Feel the weight of what you carry. At noon, she stood beneath a shaded overhang, watching cadets run drills, eyes darting between obstacle walls and shooting posts. She saw Rainey among them, the girl with the clipped voice and sharp tongue. Rainey noticed her too, but didn't say anything this time. Just stared. The sergeant approached with a clipboard. "Entry form," he said. "Write whatever name you want called out at the starting line." She looked at the blank page, then wrote, slowly, carefully, "Marley J. Riding Tank." He read it, nodded. People forget names, but not stories. As he walked away, Rainey stepped up, arms folded. "You're not scared?" she asked. "Of embarrassing yourself?" Marley didn't look at her. "I've already been laughed at. That's done." Rainey smirked. "All right, cowgirl. Let's see if you're more than just fast fingers." Marley mounted Tank and trotted off. She didn't turn around. In the distance, clouds gathered over the hills. Dust kicked up in spirals behind her. The course was being set. The crowd would be bigger next time. The challenge would be harder. But Marley wasn't thinking about any of that. She was thinking about rhythm, about breath, about a father's hands teaching hers in the dim of a barn while the world outside forgot their names. She gripped the reins tighter. The laughter had stopped, but the proving had just begun. The sky cracked open with a dry wind as the obstacle course stretched wide across the gravel lot, marked by flags, sandbags, and target stations. Spectators gathered in the bleachers, a sea of uniforms and civilian caps, their murmurs folding into the low thump of speakers announcing names. The exhibition was officially underway. Marley sat atop Tank at the edge of the field, eyes narrowed beneath her ball cap. Her saddle was simple, worn soft by years of quiet rides, and she held the reins in one hand like she'd been born with them. Tank shifted his weight, sensing the tension beneath her stillness. To their left, cadets took position, older, taller, muscle-wrapped in sweat and confidence. Their horses gleamed with polished tack and braided manes. Rainey sat high on a sleek bay, giving Marley a smirk as she passed. "You sure he's not going to trip over his own tail out there?" Rainey called. "Might want to get a real horse next time." Marley didn't reply. She stroked Tank's shoulder gently. He'd carried her through hailstorms and brush fires. This arena of cones and rifles wouldn't shake him. The announcer's voice crackled over the speaker. "Next up, Marley J. Riding Palomino Gelding Tank. Entry class, solo rider, live fire, mounted sequence." There was a beat of confused murmurs. "She's the kid from the M4 demo," someone whispered near the front. "The one with the pink gun." The sergeant stood beside the scoring table, arms crossed, jaw tight. He gave Marley a nod as she rode past. It wasn't encouragement. It was recognition. She approached the starting line. Tank pawed at the ground, his ears rotating like radar dishes. 3, 2, 1, go. Marley clicked her tongue. Tank surged forward. The first leg was speed, zigzagged through flags, ducking beneath low bars. Most cadets used reins and leg cues, but Marley rode differently. No reins, no saddle horn grip, just balance, knees, breath. Her body moved with the horse like water down a mountainside. A puff of chalk exploded as she passed the first checkpoint. The crowd leaned forward. Next came the first shooting station, 6 clay targets mounted on barrels. Riders were meant to stop, draw, and fire. Marley didn't stop. She leaned into Tank's gallop, drew the rifle from the holster across her back, and fired in rhythm. 1, 2, 3, adjusted, reloaded for 5, 6. All shattered in mid-motion. Gasps followed her. "She didn't even aim," someone muttered. "No," said a veteran near the rail. She remembered. The course twisted through tighter obstacles now. Barrels arranged like a puzzle, balance beams meant to force dismounts. Marley rode low, whispering to Tank, guiding him with knees alone. They weaved through like ghosts, fluid and fast. At the second fire station, moving targets spun on wires. Marley slowed this time, not because she needed to, but because she could. Every breath synced with a rising wind. She hit 4 of 5. The fifth nicked and spun sideways, just missing the mark. The sergeant raised an eyebrow. Marley rode on, dust lifting behind her like smoke from fire. Near the final leg, a mechanical popper launched a dummy from behind a hay bale. It was a child-shaped silhouette, painted with hostile red. Most riders froze. Marley didn't. She drew again and fired in one motion. The popper fell flat. At the finish line, a row of flags snapped in the wind. Marley slowed Tank to a trot, then a halt, letting her rifle rest across her thighs. Her breathing was steady, controlled. The announcer's voice returned, tinged now with awe. Final time for Marley J. 2 minutes, 41 seconds. Target hit count, 11 of 12. Silence. Then a smattering of claps. Scattered, uncertain. And then a roar, low, then rising, from the veteran section. Not the cadets, not the officers, but the older men and women who'd seen real war and knew what kind of discipline didn't come from books or medals. Marley dismounted, patting Tank's neck, whispering something only he would hear. The sergeant approached her. "You all right?" She nodded once. It was slower than it should have been. He let out a short, dry laugh. "You're your father's child, all right." Rainey stalked past, jaw clenched, her own score lower, time slower. She didn't look at Marley this time, just walked on, swallowed by the crowd. A man in civilian clothes stepped out of the command tent. Crisp white shirt, brass nameplate. Colonel Winston. His eyes were sharp, mouth tight. He approached the sergeant first. "Who signed her up?" "She did." The sergeant replied evenly. "This wasn't meant for children. It's a liability." She followed the rules. "Beat half your cadets doing it. She's not even enrolled in the program. She doesn't need to be." Winston turned to Marley. "You think this is a game, Miss J?" Marley didn't answer. He stepped closer. "You think some backwoods tricks make you special? This place is for real training. For real soldiers." "She knows that better than most of the kids out here," the sergeant snapped. Marley looked up at the colonel. Calm, unafraid. "I'm not here to be special," she said. "I'm here to finish what my father started." The colonel stared, something unreadable flickering behind his rigid posture. Then he turned sharply and walked off. The sergeant rubbed the back of his neck. "He'll try to shut this down." "I don't care," Marley said softly. He studied her again, more carefully now. "I've got something else to show you, but it's not a test." She nodded. "Then I'm ready." The wind shifted. Thunder rumbled far in the distance. The sun dipped behind the tents, casting long shadows across the empty course. Marley stood beneath the flag she had just passed, rifle slung, boots dusty, heart steady. The proving was done, but something deeper was waiting. That evening, the sky turned bruised with dusk as folding chairs were dragged into neat rows beneath the main pavilion. Yellow light spilled from string bulbs overhead, casting long shadows across the dirt lot where military families, veterans, and cadets gathered for the awards dinner. It was less a celebration than a formality. Handshakes, certificates, and polite applause. Marley sat with her mother near the edge of the crowd, legs swinging beneath her chair, boots caked with dried mud. Tank was tied nearby, dozing softly, as if the chaos of the day hadn't touched him. Her mother hadn't spoken much since the run. She didn't need to. Her hand had rested gently on Marley's back the entire time. The announcer cleared his throat at the microphone. "Before we close, we'd like to recognize the standout youth cadet of the day, a competitor who showed exceptional poise, skill, and command presence. The selection committee has made their decision." Marley didn't react. She just watched the stage, hands folded in her lap. A hush swept the crowd as the announcer continued. "This year's invitation to the state-level Youth Tactical Summit goes to Cadet Rainey Thomas." A smattering of applause followed. Rainey stood stiffly from the center row and walked toward the stage. But her face wasn't proud. It was pale. Her eyes briefly met Marley's, then darted away. The sergeant, standing off to the side, didn't clap. His jaw tightened, and he turned to the colonel behind the curtain, who offered a thin, unreadable smile. Marley felt the sting, not in her chest, but in the hollow space where hope had quietly waited. She had known. Part of her had always known. As Rainey took the certificate with a forced smile, the announcer gestured toward the side tent. All youth participants will receive commendations. Please see Sergeant Walker for your pin. Marley stood. Her mother touched her arm. You don't have to go up there. I know, Marley said, but she went anyway. Behind the tent, Rainey stood alone, still holding the certificate like it weighed too much. Marley didn't look at her as she approached the sergeant. He held out the small brass pin, an eagle in mid-flight. They gave me these to hand out to the kids, he said quietly. Feels wrong. Marley reached for the pin, closed it in her fist. Don't feel wrong to me. He studied her. That run you made today? I've seen soldiers with 5 years of training fall apart under pressure like that. She didn't answer. They changed the scoring, he muttered. I watched them. Colonel's office didn't want the headline to be about a little girl beating cadets in front of their own families. Marley stared at the ground. It's fine. No, it's not. It is to me, she said. Because I didn't ride to win. I rode because he taught me how. He exhaled slowly, nodding. I want to show you something. They walked behind the admin tent, down a gravel path that curved around the training fields. The sky had darkened to navy blue. Stars blinked through thinning clouds. At the end of the path stood a small memorial wall, barely visited, half forgotten. Names etched in bronze. A flag forever at half-mast. The sergeant pointed to one name. Drew J. Beneath it, a single inscription. He served with silence and stood without fear. Marley's fingers hovered over the cold metal. He wanted to be buried here, the sergeant said, close to the sound of boots and rifles. Said it made him feel like he was still watching. I thought he'd be forgotten, Marley whispered. That they'd erase him like today. They can't erase someone like him. Not when you're still out here, proving he mattered. She blinked hard, and the silence between them thickened. The sergeant reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, a thin dog tag on a rusted chain, marked with 2 sets of initials. One was Drew J's, the other, freshly engraved, MJ. He had this made the week before deployment, he said. Told me, if anything happened to him, to give it to you when I thought you were ready. Marley took it carefully, like it might shatter. She closed her hand around it and nodded once. They walked back in silence. At the trailer, her mother waited with a blanket draped over her shoulders, eyes unreadable. She looked at the tag in Marley's hand and nodded. As they packed to leave, the colonel approached from across the gravel. His uniform was neat, his eyes shadowed in the low light. You've made quite a stir, he said. People don't forget moments like today. Marley said nothing. He crouched down slightly to meet her eyes. But this isn't a fairy tale. We have rules, systems, expectations. She held his gaze. I don't need a fairy tale. He looked at her for a moment longer, then stood. Don't waste that talent, Miss J. But remember, discipline matters more than drama. She didn't answer. As he walked away, the sergeant approached. You want to prove something to people like him? Keep showing up. Quiet, sharp, dangerous. Marley swung into the saddle. Tank snorted and pawed the dirt. The sergeant gave a half salute. You're not a cadet. You're not a soldier. But you've got a warrior's heart. And I've seen where that leads. Marley adjusted her grip on the reins. I'll be back. I know. She nudged Tank forward. The lights faded behind them, swallowed by the night. Gravel gave way to open road. The stars above stretched out like silent sentinels. She didn't need applause. She didn't need medals. She had her father's voice in her memory, her mother's quiet strength beside her, and a horse beneath her who'd never let her fall. And as the wind met her face and the horizon unfolded ahead, Marley J. rode not to prove herself anymore, but to honor what had already been proven.